Okay, I started the audio recording. So we were basically going to talk about miracles and all of the stuff regarding prior probability or likelihood or unlikelihood. This was the thing you wanted to talk about, right?
Yeah,
Okay, so do you want to start or should I?
I can start. So, um, Hume Hume has an argument against miracles that if the evidence for the testimony is less than the evidence of the against the you know so okay, so I had to go back a little bit. So miracles I'm going to define as something that breaks the laws of nature, or what we observe as laws of nature, law like state. So with this so this is an example. So this is for something like the moon splitting, or what do you call that, the water duplication and the food duplication, that those miracles do exist in religions.
Yes.
So a miracle is something that breaks the law of nature, and for something to be a miracle, it has to be the case that the evidence. Okay, let's see. How do I phrase this? So the evidence for the I'll just take the example of moon splitting. For the moon splitting to be a miracle, uh, it has to be the case that the moon doesn't split, or we never observe, or basically almost never observe the moon splitting. So the evidence that the moon doesn't split has to be greater than the evidence of the moon splitting for the moon splitting to be a miracle. Now, if you compare that to testimony, so the whole thing with this is that we're saying that the testimony of people is reliable. Generally, it is the case that testimony of people is reliable. Now, we can compare testimony and the miracle and the miracle, and we can compare between which one is more miraculous. And if the testimony's falsehood is not more miraculous than the miracle itself that the testimony is establishing, then we're not rationally permitted to believe in the miracle on account of that testimony. So that's the whole thing. I can then go on to say something like, well, from cognitive psychology and from just general, I guess just general psychology of people and testimony, we know that people tend to lie, or they tend to get deceived and
Real
blah blah
time,
blah. Yet, but
like, can you just keep it to one point? Like, first, we can discuss the general Hume's point, and then I would be more than happy to
mm,
get to the point about psychology and people lying.
I mean, yeah. So this is the whole. I mean, I'm just saying this is part of Hume's argument. But I'm saying that you can. Okay, so this is part of his argument. But okay, let's not get to I mean, you're going to. Okay, well, whatever. I'm basically saying that the evidence of testimony's reliability is actually less than the evidence that the moon doesn't split. Therefore, it's not rationally permitted to believe that the moon has split based on the testimony itself. So that's basically what I'm trying to say.
Okay, first of all, I'll try to respond to all of this. First point regarding Hume's claim. His basic point was that his point was that we don't see miracles, and therefore that it makes it unlikely. I'm simplifying this a bit, and you can respond to this if you want, but later. But I don't think his point works. For instance, and there's a reason for this. Firstly, there's a lot of testimonial evidence with regards to miracles. So Hume himself said that we should take the testimony of people seriously, like certain cases we should take it seriously. Who gets to decide what is which testimony should we should take and we should not take? He's not giving a
Mm,
rational argument for this. He's giving his assumptions. There's a difference between assumptions and
okay.
evidence. Real time, let me just respond, then you can come back to this.
Mm,
Okay, so this is the first point regarding this. Secondly, with regards to testimony not being fundamental or not, like there's a lot of philosophical discussion in this regard, and many modern philosophers in the science of epistemology and etc. are now arguing that testimony is fundamental. Moreover, it is a fact that it's fundamental because we have to rely on it. For many cases, for one
Mm.
instance, for all our history, all of it is based on testimonial knowledge. Even if you have early sources, in that case, you have a person's testimony. You have an early testimony, but you still
Mm.
have a testimony. So that's the first thing. And for instance, testimony is essential in science. How are you going to do science without testimony? You have to take the words of the scientist, or you have to do the experiments yourselves otherwise. And even if you are doing the experiment yourself, you would still have to rely on testimony, because you did not invent the methods of the experiment. How are you going to know they are reliable or not without checking testimony? So this is the first claim. The basic premise of Hume's claim is basically garbage. Now, uh, you can try to augment that by saying that we don't see miracles now and since the time of cameras, but that's a different argument from Hume was making. You can try to do that, and we can
Yeah.
get into that later. But I don't think Hume's claims
Okay.
work. Moreover, here's the important thing that needs to be kept in mind. If someone comes up with a random criteria, there needs to be justification or arguments for that criteria. Like, for instance,
Mm.
let me just make a random criteria. Suppose for materialist science to be true, right? Uh, it should be the case that the mind or the mental side of things never have a physical effect, or they don't cause a physical effect. In fact, the alternate should always be the case. I can come up with this criteria, and if this is the case, then things like the placebo effect, etc., would prove materialism to be false. But you can say it's a subjective criteria. This is the same thing here. You can't just pull a criteria out of thin air and expect people to take it seriously. There needs to be some justification for it. First point. So this addresses the point regarding Hume's basic criteria. Now you can respond to this, and then we can get into the part about people lying and about the camera thing.
Okay, so I mean, Hume does provide a criteria for accepting which testimonies and whatnot. So first off, you
Real
mentioned
time.
that testimony is important. Yes.
Just to correct one point.
Yeah.
I did not say that he did not provide a criteria. I said there needs to be
Yeah, but
justification for
objective.
that
It's
criteria.
you said it's an assumption that he makes.
I said that there needs to be justification for the criteria.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, fair enough. Yeah, so you did mention that testimony is important. Yes, Hume also agrees that testimony is important. But Hume's contention is with using testimony for miracles, and that's the thing he's trying to say. So he's trying to basically compare testimony and with miracles. Okay, so let's imagine that. Example again. So the moon splitting is a miracle because we never observed the moon split. Now, here's the thing: how do we determine when testimony is reliable? We determine it based on observations. How do we determine that the moon doesn't split? We determine it on the basis of observations. Now we can compare the two. So we can see if testimony is more reliable or the moon not splitting is more reliable. So now I can say, well, look at this. If the evidence that testimony is reliable is less than the evidence that the moon doesn't split, then we aren't rationally committed to believing in this in the miracle based on that testimony. And so you can imagine a proposition P implies Q. If that's only true if if you show that when you assume P, it results in Q. So now you just think about it. Well, if so, evidence for the testimony being so okay. So this is getting complicated here. Wait, let me. So okay, I'm gonna pull up my notes here. But in the meantime, I'm going to talk about testimony that you brought up for science and history. So historians do agree that testimony is important, but I don't think they would say that testimony is like the cornerstone of they would. I think they would tend to agree that testimony is weaker compared to other things, and that if you don't have anything else, well, it's like, okay, yeah, you can probably believe in it, but it's like it's really not as great as you would like it to be. And they tend to rely on I guess other sources more than testimony. And for science, the testimony of the experiments and one. So with science, it gets more complicated. So So first off, there was reproducing the experiment, and if that doesn't work out, then that means there was something else that affected the original experiment, or that they made a mistake and whatnot, or that they were actually committing fraud. And on the point of fraud, you can discover frauds if the data seems very very fishy using statistical tools, and people are doing this, by the way. One example, I mean, you can look up on YouTube. There's a guy that makes videos on fraud in science, and they're able to find out these frauds using statistics. So if there is some statistical anomaly and whatnot, yes, you can do that. But do you trust testimony? I mean, yeah, you do. But again, I don't think that is quite relevant here, because like we said here, Hume's contention is with using testimony for miracles. Now I can come back to that point again. I have my notes ready. Okay, where is this? So for evidence being public, empirical.
Real time.
It's not restricted.
You just said a lot of things.
Yeah.
Can I just respond to them now, and then you can make your other point? Because to be honest, I don't want to have a discussion where you go on for 10 minutes, I go on for 10 minutes. Like, just keep it to 2-3 minutes.
You cut out there. Can you repeat what you just said?
I'm saying that, can I just respond to
can you repeat what you just said?
I'm saying that, can you just respond to the things? Can I just respond to the things you have said so far, and then you can make your other point?
Okay, yeah, you can respond to the testimony for science and history.
And the first part
I guess,
as well.
I mean, but again, I mean, I don't think it's quite relevant, because Hume's contention is a testimony for the miracles. He's not contending that testimony in of itself is useless. He's only saying that it's not really the case that it's good for miracles, establishing that miracles are good.
Can I just let's let me respond to the point?
Yeah, you can go ahead. Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, so here's the thing about Hume. He is taking testimony as evidence in general. Like, even in historical cases for historical events, he is taking testimony as evidence. Like, for instance, just to give a hypothetical thought example, suppose a whale washed up in a land that is near to the sea or the ocean, right? And there are people reporting about it. There are numerous people reporting about it.
Your voice is cutting out.
What?
Your voice is cutting out.
Just give me one moment. Just give me one moment. Is the voice cutting out now?
Yeah, sure.
Is the voice cutting out?
Oh, yeah, it's fine now.
Okay, I'll try to respond.
No, it's fine.
So, first thing, we agree on the fact that Hume did not challenge testimony as a whole, right? His contention was that testimony is just for miracles. Here is the problem with this. If he's saying that his testimony in general is reliable, or it can be taken as evidence, but it's not in the case of miracles, he owes us a special argument for that. Keep this in mind. Firstly, he cannot just say that we don't see things now, therefore miracles are improbable. And I think this is the same argument you are making, that we don't see moon split now, therefore the moon never split. I think this claim is nonsensical, and just as I brought last week,
that's not what we're talking.
I think it is.
Just let me
real time. Just let me finish this point, and then you can respond. I will and I'll briefly address the point about science and history as well. But just let me finish this point. Here's the thing. If we don't see miracles right now, if we don't see the moon split right now, that doesn't make it probable or improbable that moon did not split in the past. You have to look at the overall historical evidence and the value of the testimony, whether it's reliable or not. Hume is saying it's automatically unreliable when it comes to miracles, but I don't think that's the case. I think he owes us an argument for that, and what you're just doing is you're just stating that his argument and assuming that everyone needs to take it seriously. But since Hume is not an authority for me, why should I? Why should anyone else, for that matter? This is
okay. Can I comment now?
Just give me 30 seconds.
Justification thing.
Real time. Just give me 30 seconds. I'll address the point about history and science.
Oh yeah, sure.
And then you can respond. Firstly, as for the point about history, testimony is absolutely crucial with regards to history. You cannot have, even if you have very early sources, you are taking testimony. Even if you have a very early inscription, you are still taking testimony in that case. So history is indispensable without. Secondly, with regards to science, here's the point. Yes, experiments can be repeated, but unless you do the experiment yourself, The knowledge you are receiving there is by testimony, nothing else. Thirdly, and
No.
this is a Yuki. This is a one-on-one discussion.
Okay, shut up.
This is one last point in this regard. You said that historians are basically disagreeing with testimony, and this basically implies that modern Western historians are disagreeing with it. Why should we just take their opinion seriously? What about other historians? What about other historical traditions? You can't just assume that the Western tradition is right and that everyone else needs to take from there. You can respond to all these. Uh, I'll.
Okay, so okay, I'm just gonna talk about Hume's stuff. Okay, so what I said was if the evidence for the testimony is lower than the evidence that the moon doesn't split, and evidence for the moon doesn't splitting is pretty obvious. We look at the sky, the moon is there, so it doesn't split, and we have never observed that in history. Even in history, there's so I think there's two instances. So one is the Muslim version, and then the other is some. I think it was something in North America by Aztecs or wherever it was. But those were the two claims. Now, well, I don't even know if the Aztec one is legit, but I'm just going off of there. So now, so I can show you that. So what I'm trying to establish, what Hume is trying to establish, is that if the evidence for the testimony's reliability is less than the evidence for the breakage of the moon, that the moon doesn't split, then we are not rationally permitted to believe in that in the moon splitting based on that testimony. And there is a good reason for this, because he thinks that so like I said, if P implies Q, we show that P is true, and then Q is all, if we assume that P is true and then Q turns out to be true, then that P implies Q is a true proposition that we have to take seriously. So now we'll try justifying that. So first off, we'll say that evidence for the testimony's reliability is actually evidence for the miracle occurring. The evidence for the law-like state that the miracle violates is evidence against the miracle occurring. So the fact that the moon doesn't, we have never observed the moon splitting. Again, now observation is important. Observation is the cornerstone of also of testimony too. You know that testimony is reliable because of observations. And now you observe the moon doesn't split, and the moon not splitting, and that is evidence against the moon splitting. So now, if we say that the evidence that the moon doesn't split is greater than the evidence against the, then if we say that the evidence that the moon doesn't split is greater than the evidence of the testimony's reliability, then obviously the evidence against the miracle is much greater than the evidence for the miracle. Therefore, we have no justification in believing the miracle, or at worst, we have negative justification for believing in the miracle. And obviously, this follows that it is not rational to believe in the miracle based on testimony, because you should not believe in things that there's little justification or negative justification to believe. So, and you point on science is right. Yes, you do need testimony, but again, that wasn't the point. I mean, with what I said before, against miracles here. The thing that's comparing is different, and also if like a bunch of scientists end up doing it, well, now it's like there's a lot of evidence against there's a lot of evidence that this thing is a real thing because it's reproducing every time. So you can respond to that.
Okay, I will just briefly address the point about science. Even if a lot of scientists are doing it, unless you do the experiment yourself, you are still taking their testimony. So, this is just a brief point regarding science and testimony. That's not as important as the Hume stuff. Now, I'll get to it. In all of your discussion, you are using the fact that we don't see miracles now. That is evidence against moon splitting. And you are saying that very few historical cases of this exist. That is evidence against moon splitting. But I don't think this claim works. And there's a reason why. Because here's the thing. The assumption is, and this is something you are assuming, that if miracles or moon splitting was to happen, it would happen all the time. But this claim is nonsensical because it is by definition a miracle, and miracles don't happen all the time. So it just seems to me you are just assuming your conclusion and just trying to use different words to say the same thing. First thing. Secondly, with regards to miracle or supernatural events, right? There is a lot of testimonial record with regards to that. You can't, and this is present in pretty much all cultures throughout history, right? There are miracle records. There is testimony and there is records about miracle pretty much everywhere. If I'm not wrong, I don't think I am on this. So why cherry pick that over the other? Here's what you can say. Uh, Again, the only argument you can try to make in this regard is the camera thing, or you can say that
Yeah.
like if you have to make your argument, you have to come up with something different. Then I think we don't see miracles now, because if you are making this argument, I can bring literally 1,000 examples from evolution and say we don't see these things happen now, and therefore it's unlikely. But you believe all of those things did happen, or most evolutionists or most atheists or agnostic believe those things did happen. So if I just apply your own criteria to things like evolution, I will not get into that in detail here. We did that in the last discussion.
Okay,
But
yeah.
if I do that, your beliefs simply get
Okay,
debunked
can
on your own
I respond
criteria.
to that? I mean, we're going off
Yes,
track now. So you disagree that if you know if the evidence, so you disagree that us not seeing the moon split is actually evidence against a miracle, right?
yes, I disagree, and moreover, I disagree with it based on the criteria you yourself use in your own beliefs.
Okay. So do you agree that observation is a good observation is what we use to justify testimony?
Testimony is based on observation. Yeah, I agree with this.
Yeah. Okay. So but okay. So now we can go into okay, so, but you don't think that observations of the moon not splitting is actually evidence against the moon splitting, right?
Yes, and if you permit me, I'll just
I
want to
mean,
give
I
a
don't think that follows
real
it.
time.
Yeah.
I'll just give one example of this. For instance, we don't see right now the Mongols or the Mongolians or Tatar people invading the world. It does not follow that it never invaded the world. Same way, we don't see the moon split right now. It does not follow
Okay. Okay.
that the moon never split.
That's a
You can
history
respond.
example. So that's a history example. But
Moon
we don't
splitting
have
is also
only
history.
testimony about the Mongol Empire. We have evidence of their government, evidence of the thing. It's not a one-to-one mapping. So the moon splitting, all we have is the evidence of testimony. That's all we have. That's completely different from something like, well, the government existing and the government having records. I think that it's not a good comparison.
Real time, let me just slightly tweak my
Mm.
argument. We can talk
Yeah,
about the
sure, sure.
existence of Genghis Khan in this regard. We don't have his body. We have no evidence for his existence
Mm.
other than testimony. So, do you believe Genghis Khan
Really?
existed? Because we literally have no evidence for his existence other than testimony. You can
Okay.
respond.
Okay, so if people lived in the past, obviously, they're going to die and their body is going to decompose. So obviously, we should not expect that their bodies are surviving for us to say that they existed. So it has to
We
be
can
something
have
else. The
graves.
historians are going to have their own methodology.
Real
You're saying
time?
that it's just testimony establishing it, right?
Well, almost all of it, I would say, in most cases, is based on testimony. For instance, even if we don't have his dead body, we can have his bones, or we can at least have his grave. We
Okay.
don't.
Um.
We don't have his grave.
Well, I mean, graves can get lost. I mean, this is very common. You are not going to find some random person. Well, okay, so I don't know the circumstances of his death, but it could be that he died in a circumstance where his body was never able to be recovered or his grave. But I don't think those graves, even if there was a grave, you would say that when the grave is established by testament, you would not say that the grave just is proof of Genghis Khan. So I think
Real
that
time,
Genghis Khan probably has some
his
other proofs against it, like proofs for himself, his existence, which is something like maybe coins or people talking about him outside his thing, outside the Mongol Empire. People talking about this guy, and then so on and so forth. They would have less, illusion in some sense, if you get me. I don't know exactly what it is, but you would have to show me that Genghis Khan is the same as the moon splitting. I'm really not on the same page with you here.
Here's the problem with your claim real time. The evidence we have for Genghis Khan, all of it is based on testimony. You are saying it's based on something else. I'm not saying the existence of
Yeah.
Genghis Khan is as equal or as likely as the moon splitting. What I am saying, in both cases, all you have is testimony. You cannot just say that testimony is a problem for miracles, but it's not for Genghis
Mm.
Khan. You have to have other arguments. Here's the fundamental problem with your argument. You are saying all we have for miracles is testimony. You said this earlier, and we have more for
Yeah.
history. We don't have more for Genghis Khan. We don't have more for Genghis Khan other than testimony. So you need to slightly tweak your argument or modify it for
Okay,
it
so
to work.
you do agree that this is like a one-to-one mapping to moon splitting?
I'm sorry, can you repeat what
Hmm?
you said?
Yeah, yeah. You think that this is a one-to-one mapping of, Genghis Khan's testimony is almost the same as the moon splitting's testimony? Is that what you think?
No, I don't think it's the same. I think they're both reliable, but I think in both cases, all we have is testimony, and we can talk about it.
No, no.
Actually,
It's not just okay.
uh, you can address this point in a
Okay.
moment,
You
but
think
with regards to moon testimony, the moon
the
splitting,
equal? This like
real time,
oh,
just let me finish this point and
okay.
it will
You
take
know.
10 seconds, then you can respond. With regards to Islamic
Yeah. Go ahead.
historical record, I can show, based on the criteria Western historians themselves use, Islamic historical records are more authentic and reliable than any other historical records. This is something I can show. With regards to the testimony and reliability of Islamic historical records, you can respond.
Okay. Yeah. Um, first off, I mean, you do okay, you don't really agree with that first premise of Hume's as well. So that's another thing. But okay, so with the Genghis Khan thing, maybe it is all testimonials, but um, I would argue that, well, Genghis Khan's existence is not, miraculous, right? And well, now you would probably have some fine tuning issues here, yeah. So that's going to be interesting. Um,
I agree with that.
okay, so
Genghis
so
Khan's
now we can go
existence is
into,
not
yeah, yeah.
miraculous.
Okay, so yeah, so you were talking about now, um, Islamic sources, and for the yeah, I guess we would have to come to this point, because now we are going to compare testimonies of Genghis Khan and this stuff for Islam, for well, the moon splitting. I think that there's like two witnesses for um, the moon splitting. One was Ibn Mas'ud, and the other was, I don't know who that guy was, but most of the other sources are just them recounting that. I think most of the others are not. We're not witnesses. They're just saying, yeah, I was told that this is the case, and so we have like two people that witnessed the event, and now I can also say that there's no outside sources of something like this happening, even though they should, because the moon splitting is very, 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 completely foreign to everyone. No one has witnessed that in history, at least in the Middle East, or whatever the places there was at night, right? And now that becomes a problem for us. And then there was also the Indian king, but that Indian king story source goes back to the Mughal Empire, which is not, it's not contemporary of the time, and that's basically all we have for the moon splitting, and that should lower us now. In that should basically lower our probability for accepting that testimony. Now, the moon splitting is completely different from Genghis Khan. As you noted, Genghis Khan is not a miraculous figure, and because of that fact, I mean, people would have very low probability for. People are going to have less, motivation to make up stuff about him. And if there's outside sources outside of the Mughal Empire, then that's going to even more. That's going to be more evidence for Genghis Khan, and now we can say that, well. Yeah, so yeah, I don't think it's a one-to-one mapping basically, and so the testimony for Genghis Khan is different from the testimony for the moon splitting, uh, and that's why it's not a one-to-one mapping, and I guess you can go ahead now. Now
Okay.
that would mean that you can go ahead now.
Okay, so firstly, I agree Genghis Khan and moon splitting are not one-to-one mapping. But what I
Can
disagree with,
can you hear me?
yeah, I think
Hello.
your voice was cutting out earlier, but I pretty much heard everything you said.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. Okay,
Okay,
you can go ahead now.
so firstly, with regards to Genghis Khan and moon splitting, I agree it's not a one-to-one mapping, but both of them are entirely based on testimony. There is not something magical other thing here, other than testimony here. That's the
Yeah,
first
but I
point.
just established that the testimonies are different.
Let me get to it, right? Like I let you speak for 10 minutes. Let me address all those points.
Mm.
Okay, so firstly, you made the points regarding that the testimony evidence for moon splitting is limited in Islamic historical records, and you gave some examples for that, and now I'll address each of them. So here's the problem with this claim. There's a fundamental problem with this claim. Here's what you are right on. The main eyewitness, as far as I know, or the only eyewitness testimony we have for moon splitting is Ibn Masud. This is what you write on. But I don't think this lessens the evidence for moon splitting. There's a reason for this. Is that he's the
Mm.
only eyewitness, but there are numerous other companions who lived recently, very close to that time, who are reporting this event as well. This is mass transmitted or mutawatir according to Islamic
I
historical records.
Yeah,
Because of
eyewitness
that
of the
reason,
moon splitting, right?
what?
One witness, one witness, right?
Yeah, but just let me finish this point.
Yeah.
Let me finish this point. According to Islamic in the Islamic historical records, the eyewitness, the main eyewitness who is reporting is only Ibn Masud. But there are a lot of other people reporting this event as well who lived at around the same time period. Unless you are positing a mass conspiracy here and you can try to do that, it's highly unlikely all of those people are lying. And in fact, for most events, we have in history we have similar records like this. You have a few eyewitnesses, one or a few eyewitnesses, and most of the people who lived near that time period are reporting it as well. So I don't think this is a much of an issue based on Islamic historical records. Secondly, if you are trying to make an argument that this is insufficient according to Islamic historical records, I would point out that this event is mutawatir, mass transmitted. According to our criteria, it's reported from so many sources in different regions, it's unlikely they are all making it up. So, even if you don't agree that moon splitting actually took place, I think it's irrational to claim that based on Islamic historical record, if someone accepts Islamic historical record, you cannot say that the moon splitting is improbable or unlikely. Right now, I'm not arguing whether it's true or not. I'm saying whether if someone accepts the Islamic historical record on the basis of it, you cannot argue that moon splitting is improbable or unlikely. That's the first point. The second point you addressed was the Indian king thing. I don't know when that is likely dated. I think it's earlier than the Mughal period. I'm not sure if it's contemporary or not. I think it's not contemporary to the time of the moon splitting, but I don't think it's from the Mughal period. So I'm not making my argument based on that. So I don't have an issue with it, but I don't
Okay.
think it's from the
Okay.
Mughal period. The third point, you made a
Okay.
claim that if the moon splitting did occur, we would have a massive amount of historical evidence for it. I think this claim is
But more
blatantly
than
false.
Muslim.
I think this claim is blatantly false. And I can get into more details in this regard, but we actually have here's an important point to remember. Moon splitting only occurred for 10 to 15 like it's not necessarily it occurred for hours. It could or days. In fact it did not occur for days. It probably only occurred for minutes or hours. Hour to hour probably or some minutes. Right? Here is a simple fact. We actually have historical records about certain astronomical events, and I'll give a reference here. I've given a reference here in a thread,
Supernovas.
and I can read it if you
Yeah.
like. Actually, this is not. This is the
Where
wrong one.
this?
This is the wrong one. It's. I think it was
Where
a
are you?
Japanese event or Chinese event. This is the wrong thread.
Yeah, Canada depression. I know this guy.
I'm sorry. What?
No, I know this guy. I've seen that thread.
Okay, actually, I linked the wrong thread. Give me a moment, I'll link the right one.
I know.
Until then, we can talk about
Okay,
some
so
other thing. Let me just finish this
okay,
point.
I can respond to it.
No, let me just respond to your this
Okay.
point. Finish this point and respond to your other points. There's one other point you made. I'll respond to that as well. Here's a simple fact: we actually have historical records of other events, like moon splitting was an hour or two or some minutes. There were historical astronomical events that went on for weeks, and we have barely any historical records about them. If that is the case for events that are happening for weeks, I don't think it's a rational claim to say that the moon splitting happened only for a few minutes or an hour and we would have a massive amount of historical records for it. That this claim is nonsensical. And when you are speaking, I'll give a reference for this as well. Just to address your last point regarding people having motivations to lie, you said that people would have less motivations to lie about Genghis Khan or make things up. Or here's the problem with this claim: people always have motivations to lie. This is something Western Orientalists
You
try to
cut
do a
out.
lot. Uh, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can. It's
Okay.
muffled.
Okay, I'll repeat what I said. You were claiming that people have more motivation to lie for miracles than, say, for existence of Genghis Khan. This claim is nonsensical,
Mm,
and I'll explain why. People always have motivations to lie, especially when politics are concerned. You cannot just say that people have just people are lying when miracles are concerned, but they are not lying when
okay,
politics are
that's not what I
concerned.
said.
Just let me finish this point. It's just
Not what I
10
said.
seconds, 10 15 seconds, then you can respond. So this claim does not work, and in fact we can prove based on the criterion of dissimilarity regarding people lying or not. There are countless things in Islamic historical records that Muslims reported that were not in their favor to report. So even if you try to argue based on sincerity or insincerity or honesty or dishonesty of Muslims, I think that would be a losing argument and for pretty self-evident reasons. You can respond.
Okay, so first off, you said that there was one witness, but now it's mutawatir. So that's again a problematic claim because mutawatir is not really defined in the hadith literature. It's just there's no real criteria for that. Now we see this here. One witness is considered mutawatir if other people are reporting it. Now unless you say those people also witnessed it, so the witness would be more than one. Now that's now we're led to. Problem because one witness is considered as a mutawatir hadith. Now you're saying that those people also mass conspired. Now here's the thing: those people would only mass conspire if they had seen that, if they had it like they would have to um, witness it, and then like for me they would have to witness it and then conspire to say, they would have to not witness it, all of them, and then they would have to say that, well, this happened. But here's the thing: you said that the moon splitting could have happened for like 10 minutes or 1 hour or whatever. Now those people could have said, you know what, I was probably busy, it happened at a time when it didn't occur, blah blah blah. Now those people could have given out the same excuse, and I know that Ibn Mas'ud is not a liar, I'm going to believe him. And that is like a religious collusion. It's not mass conspiracy. They're not coming together and saying, let's deceive people. It's more like, well, it probably happened because Ibn Mas'ud seems to be a good person. And then you also made that supernova thing. The supernova thing is interesting because I don't think supernovas are the same thing as the moon splitting. The moon splitting is completely different from the supernova. I don't think that works because the moon splitting is I think it's so you can say that on an abstract level that those are completely foreign things to them, but I think the moon splitting is much greater, much more significant compared to the supernova thing. And now again I will say that about the Genghis Khan thing. You said that well, if people have some, if people don't have the um, the thingy to lie, they don't have the motivation to lie. But that wasn't my point. My point was there's probably outside sources of Genghis Khan and other things as well that are establishing it. Now, outside sources have less reasons to lie. The Mongol Empire, they could say, there was this great guy, great king that lived, and blah blah. They could lie about him and exaggerate it. But outside sources, they're going to exaggerate in the opposite direction. That's also another thing. I know. I mean, I don't know how historians probably deal with it. They probably have a good methodology. Now, but now here's the thing: they should should be outside sources for this. Supernovas and moon splitting are the same thing. If people every single day look at the moon, this is the same moon, and if that's split, they are going to write about it. In my opinion, they are going to talk about it more than the supernova thing, and that's basically the thing, and that should establish that there should be a witness outside it. And even within the Islamic tradition, there was a guy that said that Hassan al-Basri did not believe this miracle occurred because the understanding of the verse, the moon has split, was different to how the other people have understood it. So now you can go ahead, basically.
Okay, I'll respond to the multiple points you said. Firstly, let's talk about the Islamic tradition. The only eyewitness is Ibn Masud, but we have numerous reports from different other regions from other companions who lived at that time or immediately after who are reporting the moon splitting. It cannot be the case if they are
Are they
living.
witnesses? Are they witnesses?
I'll address this criteria afterwards. First, I'll make this point because you are trying to mix two different arguments here, and I think all of them need specific attention.
If they're not witnesses, then you can't say there was only one witness. If they're witnesses, you can't say there was only one witness. You'd have to say they were also witnesses.
I did not say they were witnesses. I said they were reporting it. Can I just finish this my point? No. They are not reporting it from Ibn Masud. Look, real time. I'll let you finish your point. Let me finish mine.
They were witnesses then, right?
Real time. Let me finish my point. Then you can respond. Like, why not? I'll let you speak for 10 minutes, right? Let me finish the point and then you can respond. Okay, thanks. So here's the thing.
Yeah, go ahead.
The only eyewitness testimony we have from is Ibn Masud. Right now you are making an argument that according to the Islamic criteria it's not mutawatir. This claim is nonsensical, and the reason for this is that we have reports regarding the moon splitting in numerous regions. Ibn Masud was one human. He was located in a specific region. I think it was in Iraq somewhere. I think it was Kufa. I'm not sure exactly. But Ibn Masud, I'm pretty sure, was in Iraq. We have reports for moon splitting from all different regions. Ibn Masud cannot be the source of information for all the people reporting the moon splitting in numerous different regions. This is why your claim that everyone is just reporting from Ibn Masud is false. One thing. Second thing, you did not address my point that for most historical events we have one or a few eyewitnesses, and most of the other people who are reporting it are people who lived at that time or near that time. This is what happens with most historical events. So why are you having something special for the moon splitting? I don't think this claim makes sense. Second point you made was I think you made another point. Yes, your other point was that we have that supernovas happen all the time, and therefore
no, that's not. Oh my God. That's not my point. My point was the supernova is not one-to-one mapping to moon splitting. Moon splitting is much more great.
Real time.
Yeah.
Here's the problem with your claim.
I'm correcting you.
No, you are not correcting me here. You literally said supernovas happen all the time, and that's why it's not the same.
No, I didn't say that. No, I don't think I've said that.
Yes, you said it's not the same. Like, it's in the recording. Even if you are saying real time, it's not a one-to-one mapping. What's the difference between saying moon splitting and supernova?
I didn't say it happens all the time.
Are they not a frequent event? Like, supernovas happen.
I did not say it was a frequent event. I did not say it. I said that it's not the same thing as the moon splitting. Moon splitting is considered more miraculous by people, and it's going to be considered more miraculous by the people.
Supernovas happen all the time. They are they happen many times. Can we agree on this? Like, it seems you don't have another argument.
Maybe, I don't know.
You brought up supernovas. Like, I don't know what you're doing.
Supernovas, but it was for a different reason. I didn't say they happen all the time.
Real time, let me finish my point and then you can respond. Because to be honest, I let you speak without interruption.
I'm correcting you on my stance. I didn't think you're representing me correctly.
I think I am representing it correctly, but we can disagree on this. And I'll give you time to expose if I am being dishonest or if I am misrepresenting you. I'll give you time to elaborate it. Okay, so your argument was that supernovas happen even if you don't say all the time. They happen in some cases, or there are multiple reports or many reports for supernovas. Here is the problem with this claim. I think it was, but I'll explain the problem with this claim. You are
Okay,
saying
come on.
that for a
That's
particular
not
event
good.
with regards to moon splitting, you are making the argument that if moon splitting is historical, there should be massive amount of historical evidence or reports for it. Here is the problem with this claim. We have example of a specific event, a supernova, that took place for about 2 weeks, and we have very little records for it. If that's the case for an event that took place for 2 weeks, we have very little historical records for an event that took place for 2 weeks. Why would we have many historical records for an event that took place for minutes or hours? Like, this claim is nonsensical. So I think this addresses the point, the specific point you were making regarding supernovas. I think your other point was that with regards to Genghis Khan, and that people basically would have less motivation to lie. Earlier you were talking about motivation to lie. Then you said that there weren't motivation of lying, and then you said that some people would
I
have
mean,
motivation to lie
Genghis
in
Khan.
favor
Now with
of Genghis Khan, and some people would have motivation to lie against Genghis Khan. I agree that some people, that is the case. Both people will have their sets of biases and motivations to lie. But if this is the case,
mm,
like, if it's true for miracles, people have motivations to lie, then they have motivation to lie in every case. As you can't just single out miracles because you don't like them. You need to give some extra argument because you're making an extra claim regarding miracles. uh, I think I've forgotten one or two of your things. Maybe you can repeat them here and then I'll address them, and you can respond to what I said.
I was most. I think that was most of it. Oh, what? Yeah. Okay. I guess. Yeah. You did cover the other thing, minutes and hours with the other sources. Yeah. So can I respond to this?
Yes,
Oh, can you hear me?
yes, you can respond.
Okay. Wait 1 second. My internet. Okay. Yeah, it's good. Okay. So your first claim was that it's with the weather because we have other sources from other regions. Except the problem is this is all from Muslims. That's the thing. You should also expect this from non-Muslim sources, except that there are none, and you have only the Muslim sources. So why exactly should we give credence to there? Now, yeah, and with the Genghis Khan thing, that connects here. I'm just going to go over that here. So you're saying people have a reason to lie, but I think that miracles mean that the religion is more truthful. Well, people think that those people are going to think that those miracles are going to establish the proof for the religion. So they have a very important incentive to lie about the miracles, or just turn the other cheek when it comes to evidence for the miracle. Now, for the supernova, I was not arguing that supernovas happen all the time, or they're frequent occurrences, or they have more evidence for them. I was saying that supernovas are different to moon splitting, and I think people are going to consider moon splitting as a more miraculous event because they see the moon every single day over and over again, and it's the same thing. Like the pattern is the same thing. And if that pattern breaks suddenly, and something so miraculous as the moon splitting happens, I think that they're going to report on this and they're going to write about this. Sure, I mean this was enough for Muslims other than Ibn Mas'ud to write about this, but apparently not for non-Muslims. Apparently, it only applies for Muslims. That's the thing. That's the problem that I'm having with this. This should lower our probability for the whole moon splitting thing. Now, you were also talking about. There was also one point that you said I missed. I forgot that point. So if you can repeat that, and then in your next point again, or right now, that would be nice.
If
Oh
I
yeah,
rem-
yeah. So you were also talking about weeks and months. Yeah. So I mean that's pretty much covered because I said that supernovas basically are different from moon splitting. I think people will consider moon splitting as more miraculous. So I don't even need to address the whole people not having proofs for the people not writing about the supernova. And there was a point I missed. I'm asking you to repeat that in your next point or whatever. You can go ahead now if you want.
Okay, I actually have forgotten the specific point. If I remember it later, I'll repeat it. I'll address
Yeah, yeah, sure,
the
sure.
few points I do remember. Firstly, the point regarding Genghis Khan and testimony. Again, I don't see the argument you're making here. People always have reasons to lie about everything. You can't just single out miracles for this. This is not controversial. Let's take example of politics. You are, or anyone else for that matter, are not going to challenge the fact that politicians or people writing for politicians have reasons to lie. either one way or the other. This is obvious. So I don't think you can just specifically argue people have motivation to lie about miracles, therefore they are automatically unreliable. But this happens all the time. Like, this applies to all history. All history, in all of history, people have motivations to lie. This is all I will say regarding the point about Genghis Khan. Now I'll address the point about Islamic historical sources. Here is the problem for you. You were earlier making a claim. You were saying that according to Islamic historical sources and criteria, there is little evidence for moon splitting. This claim is factually false, and I think you seem to have realized this fact, because now you said that the problem is not that we don't have evidence from Islamic sources, we don't have evidence for other sources. You are making an
Okay,
argument
yeah.
based on just Islamic sources. From there we have evidence. Now I'll as to the part about why we don't have evidence from other sources, there are 2 points to consider here. Firstly, there is a question of whether Islamic sources are reliable or not. They are reliable, and I think it's easily provable they are reliable. And if you want, we can have a discussion next week on why they are reliable or they are unreliable. However, if you do, I would recommend some of my content that you can watch, and that will make the discussion more fruitful. Second question is, why don't other sources repeat it? Again, here's the problem. Events like the moon splitting, similar to supernovas, they don't have a lot of evidence for them anyway. You can't say there should be massive amount of evidence for moon splitting if there is not massive amount of moon splitting for other astronomical events. This claim is just nonsensical. Thirdly, with regards to supernova, uh, you said that it's not that, or that you did not say that supernovas are not or happen all the time, are not frequent, or are not happen more than moon splitting. But I think it's common sense, and I think it's part of your argument that supernovas at least happen more than moon splitting. uh, I think that's something you
Well,
got confused on. But just to address this point, here's the problem with your argument. Your argument is, with regards to the moon splitting, that it is a historical event. If it is, we have little evidence for it. This is your argument. But the problem is, there are other astronomical events that are at least somewhat similar to moon splitting, and we also have very little evidence for that. In fact, if we are going by your logic, let me just finish this point. If we just go
yeah,
by
you
your
said.
logic, if an event happens for 2 weeks, the supernova, and we have little evidence for it, if a moon splitting which happens for minutes or an hour, we would have much little, almost no evidence for it. And I don't think your argument works here. You are saying that supernovas are different than miracles or moon splitting, and I agree with this 100%. But your argument is that for an astronomical event like the moon splitting, there should be massive amount of evidence. That argument is baseless when we compare to the supernova. That there is little evidence for events that are happen for a much greater time span than this. So I don't think there would be evidence for moon splitting. Uh, Real time, I think we have been about here
Yeah.
for an hour. So, if you want, since you started, I think you should have just 1 minute closing statement, and I can have 1 minute closing, and then I'll end the recording.
Okay, well, I mean, so, I mean, okay, I mean, okay, so I mean, should I respond to these points? I don't know what to do now.
Actually, you can respond, and then just give your closing then, because I think we have discussed.
Okay, well, okay, you know what? Fair enough. With the intra-Islamic stuff, that is fair. You can say that happened inside using Islamic sources, but my contention was that mutawatir is ill-defined. Now, the second thing is that there are other sources, but the problem is that there's only Muslim sources, and you are agreeing with this, and you're trying to say that, and I'm saying that Muslims have a very good incentive to lie about the moon splitting because it shows that the religion is true. Now you're saying that supernovas have happened for 2 weeks or months and so on and so forth. They have little evidence, but minutes and hours we have good evidence for the moon splitting. But it's within the Muslim corpus, it's not outside the Muslim corpus. One would expect that there's non-Muslim sources as well, but it turns out it's only Muslims, and Muslims have an incentive to lie or get they have a tendency to, well, not just lie. I mean, or intentionally or not intentionally just proliferate that moon splitting thing. And that's basically what I want to say. That's basically my condensed version of what I want to say.
Okay, I'll
And
just
then
try.
now we can, you're saying, yeah.
If you want to give some closing remarks, you can do that as well.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah, this has been a nice discussion. I mean, well, I may be open to it later on, but my exams are coming up, so I don't know if I could. But we can try having it again later on. But yeah, and yeah, that's basically it.
Okay, I'll just briefly address the earlier point you said, and then I'll just make a brief closing statement. So I think we don't need to talk about the people having motivation to lie. I think at least in general, the argument from supernovas, I think it's very simple, and I think it's damning for your claim that we would expect evidence to be there for and outside Islamic sources. The problem is that, and this is a simple intuitive problem, I think anyone can understand this. We have very little evidence for events that occurred for weeks at a time. If that's the case, we cannot expect there to be much evidence for events that occurred for 10 minutes at a time. I don't think it's complicated, and to be honest, I don't think I need to say more in regards to this, so I won't.